This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
French President Macron arrives in Lebanon and visits blast site. Hiroshima survivors and families of victims attend memorial service in Japanese city. And in our continuing series Made in Africa, we feature Morocco, a country basking in the glory of saffron production. Hello and a very warm welcome to you wherever you're joining us to Africa Live only on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua, live in Nairobi. Hannah Vivier joins me now with your business headlines.
Thank you, Mahia. Here's what's coming up in the world of business. Nigeria's Axis Bank acquires loss-making Cavmont in Zambia. And Uganda's top mobile operator MTN confirms listing of 20% of its shares at the local bourse. I'll be back with more details on those stories, but for now, your current affairs making headlines with Mahia.
Anna, thank you very much. We start the hour in Beirut, where French President Emmanuel Macron has met with Lebanese leaders after visiting the site of Tuesday's deadly blast. It marks the first visit by a foreign leader after the explosion tore through the city, killing over 100 people. France was among the first countries to respond, dispatching experts, volunteers and supplies. France has retained close ties with Beirut in post-colonial times. Emmanuel Macron has vowed further support in what he calls solidarity and friendship with the Lebanese people.
We will organize more support in the coming days. I would like to set up a European cooperation and more widely an international cooperation. France will propose initiatives based on our discussions here with the teams on the ground and authorities. We will be here. We won't give up on you.
Well, witnesses have recalled the horrific moment when the explosion occurred. Some say they thought war had come again.
Well, it was a very scary moment, to be honest. As a Lebanese, I couldn't help but, in a moment like this where you hear that explosion sound, I thought maybe the war broke again. As a Lebanese, having lived the war twice already in my life, it was a very scary moment.
Some residents said it felt like an earthquake.
I was at home on the third floor. The house has a glass front and I was sitting right underneath. After the first explosion, the house shook and we thought it was an earthquake. But then maybe 10 or 15 seconds after, we felt the second explosion. And the glass broke and flew while I ran away.
My wife and I were lying down there. My wife was there and I was on the other side. I heard a loud explosion and the noise of jet engines, so I went outside to see what had happened. While I was looking at the sky, something exploded and threw me back inside, and I saw my wife here covered in blood, hit on her head and on her ears.
A young couple was having their wedding photos taken. One moment, the bride was posing with flowers. The next moment, chaos.
While what happened during the explosion, here there's no word to explain what happened. I feel so sad. Trust me, what you see now, the smile and everything, it wasn't there totally yesterday. I was shocked. I was wondering what happened. Am I going to die?
Well, CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa takes a look at the history of blasts in Lebanon.
Another blast in Beirut, a bloody one that evokes dark memories of previous calamities involving explosives, some which defined Lebanon's history and shaped events in the Middle East. This is a region whose quest for political identity has left nothing but blood and tears in its wake. As Lebanon grapples with the latest catastrophe, the world is uniting in its support. Unfortunately, previous similar incidents drew support and condemnation in equal measure for and against real and perceived perpetrators, and there are a number of these incidents. On 23 October 1983, 2 truck bombs exploded in Beirut, targeting buildings that housed American and French peacekeepers. The attack left 307 people dead, with American soldiers accounting for 241 deaths. Hundreds more were wounded. 58 French soldiers were also killed. The soldiers were part of the multinational force in Lebanon, which was enforcing a shaky ceasefire between Israel and the Palestinian Liberation Organization. The attack was the biggest single loss of American army personnel since the Vietnam War. It still lingers in infamy for the Americans. It was later blamed on Hezbollah, which was in its formative stages. However, a group calling itself Islamic Jihad claimed responsibility. 2 years later, on 8 March 1985, another car bomb rocked Beirut. It left more than 80 people, mostly civilians, dead. The attack was blamed on the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, which was allegedly seeking to assassinate Muslim cleric Syed Mohammed Hussein Fadlallah in a revenge incident for the 1983 attack. Fadlallah survived. 3 more similar attacks happened in Beirut in the same year, in May and August. Fadlallah would later die in 2010 of natural causes. In 2005, yet another high-profile car bomb happened in the city. Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri and his entourage were snaking through a street in the Corniche suburb when a truck exploded and killed 22 people. Hariri and other senior government officials were killed in the attack. The killing of Hariri touched off the Cedar Revolution, which ended a Syrian occupation of Lebanon that had been in place since 1976. It is not yet known who was behind the attack, but many locals accuse the Hezbollah militant group. It is the very same Hezbollah that triggered yet another tragic event for Beirut and Lebanon at large, an explosive tragedy. On July 12, 2006, the group staged a cross-border ambush on an Israeli patrol. The attack left 3 Israeli soldiers dead. 2 others were abducted. The response from Israel was massive, with entire neighborhoods of Beirut flattened by airstrikes. Hezbollah, on its part, fired rockets into Israeli territory, which led to over 40 deaths of civilians. Although the war ended in a stalemate, the utter suffering visited on Lebanese citizens was devastating. Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, would later say that the abduction of Israeli soldiers was a mistake. As Lebanon reels from the current tragedy, focus is now shifting on why large amounts of ammonium nitrate were kept unsafely in a warehouse at the port. Lebanon is the home of one of the main actors in the ongoing Syrian conflict, that is Hezbollah. Being the Arab nation with the biggest number of Christians in the Middle East, the country has suffered spillover effects of reverberations in the region. As the current situation evokes memories of conflicts for those who lived through them, one thing stands: Beirut will prevail as it always has. Bilkis Anyabwa, CGTN.
Today marks the 75th anniversary of the U.S. atomic bomb attack on the Japanese city of Hiroshima that killed an estimated 150,000 people. It was followed by another bombing 3 days later when 75,000 more people were killed, this time in Nagasaki. Memorial events are smaller this year due to the pandemic, and as our correspondent Grace Lee reports, that's been frustrating for the survivors.
It's been 75 years since the bombing of Hiroshima, but ceremonies to mark the occasion have been scaled back significantly due to the ongoing pandemic. Survivors and family of victims gathered in Hiroshima Peace Park today, and at 8:15 a.m., there was a minute of silence. It's the exact moment the bomb was dropped on August 6, 1945. Survivors have said that the pandemic has been frustrating. They feel they're running out of time to share their stories. Keiko Ogra was only 8 years old when it happened. She remembers fetching water for victims lying on the ground.
There were 2 persons who died in front of me drinking water from my hands. So that moment, I couldn't understand, but I started to blame myself. Oh, I killed them. If I didn't give water, they would be dead, I thought.
It was on a hot summer day just like this one that an atomic bomb was dropped 500 meters away from this very spot. The only structure left standing near the epicenter was this dome that you see behind me. It now serves as a memorial for those who passed. Since that day, victims have lived their lives fearing the stigma of being a survivor.
I was 8 years old, a small girl in elementary school, but we know that we shouldn't tell that we were in the city that day. If we tell something related to that radiation source, we cannot get married.
Many in Japan worried about possible deformities due to radiation exposure, but experts at the Radiation Effects Research Foundation in Hiroshima say there's no definitive evidence of that in survivors or their children. The biggest risk for survivors is cancer.
Both leukemia, which was seen very early after radiation, and then solid cancers, which occurred starting about 10, 15 years after radiation. And the risk for increased cancer risk continues throughout their life.
The Japanese government recognized 650,000 people as survivors of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings. As of last year, only about 145,000 of them were still alive. They are fewer every year, but they hope their message of peace will carry on, and that the world remembers the horrors of what happened here 75 years ago. Grace Lee, CGTN, Hiroshima.
The director of the Belt and Road Joint Research Center at the University of Zambia now says a decision by the government of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region to postpone the 2020 Legislative Council general election of the HKSAR is welcome. Sande Ngalande said in an interview with CGTN that the postponement is informed by the current epidemic situation. He also said the order has an interest of protecting the lives and health of Hong Kong residents and ensuring that the election is conducted in a fair and just manner. He is also calling on the international community to let the issue be, as it is an international matter.
This is an internal matter, and the world must respect the judgment made by the local government for the local people. And the judgment is based on their on the facts on the ground, based on what is obtaining on the ground. And for that matter, the situation is even worse outside China. So people outside must understand much better than China that this is not time to have business as usual. And we must respect the decision made by the local government in China for the local people. So it's entirely an internal matter within China. And we must respect the decisions made by China for the Chinese people.
Well, we're taking a short break now, but coming up on Africa Live. In our continuing series, Made in Africa, we feature Morocco, a country basking in the glory of saffron production.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Wara ni ngitali ma damas kaya.
Tammiska ikhawaha darum ko nagkaini tan ana nuku komentar ko ata isesa ismai kamangay
Welcome back. Now, after 4 straight months of closure because of COVID-19, schools in Nigeria have now reopened. But only final year students are allowed to resume classes ahead of their exams. Students and their teachers are still trying to get used to the new normal. Deji Badmus now reports.
Getting thoroughly screened before being allowed onto the school premises. This is part of a new process at a boarding school in Lagos, Nigeria. It was not always like this, but COVID-19 has changed everything.
It's really an unusual way of reasoning, but because we wouldn't want anybody into the compound, so we are making use of a car park. As you come in, they sanitize your feet, every part of your body, as you are coming in with the sanitizer spray, and then they go to the doctor who check them.
All of these measures are taken to prevent any spread of the coronavirus at the school.
The management of the school is they are like parents to the students. As I'm leaving this place now, I will not entertain any fears that anything will happen to my son.
Inside the school compound, measures have been put in place to ensure social distancing. Now, this is what social distancing means in a classroom setting. Normally, this classroom would seat 30 students, but it's been reorganized and rearranged to seat just 12 students, just to ensure that the students are spaced apart in line with the requirement for social distancing in this city. At another school, physical learning is also taking place in the classroom, but again, not in the usual way. Social distancing is clearly the order of the day, and dressing is incomplete without a face mask for both students and teachers.
As soon as we heard that the schools were going to resume, we were enlightening them. We've told them what we require from them. There'll be no food in the school. They're supposed to bring food from home. They're supposed to use their face masks, or we will not allow them into the school. If you're sick, you stay at home. You're not supposed to come to school.
While students seem to be adapting to the new normal, some say the hardest part is a sense of detachment caused by physical distance.
It really hurts. It hurts very well because seeing your close friends, you just say hi, instead of you coming close, hugging each other and saying, what's up, how has it been? But we have no choice but to abide by the law.
Leading the monitoring team to assess the situation, the State Commissioner of Education expresses satisfaction with the level of compliance in place.
Well, I think the schools are aware of the social distancing rules. They all have the prerequisite water at the beginning, the temperature gauge and so on, and the social distancing in class. I think they are quite aware. And as time goes on, it's just that they should remain aware and not relax.
Only final year students can attend school for now. The government says it is still monitoring the situation to determine when others can resume. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Africa has recorded nearly 1 million COVID-19 cases. South Africa accounts for over half of them. As the country continues to fight against the coronavirus, funeral parlors have been forced to adapt. Here is that story.
As COVID-19 related deaths continue to rise in South Africa, funeral parlors have been forced to adjust. Avbob Funeral Services is the country's largest funeral service provider. They estimate they've buried 25% of those who've died from COVID-19 in South Africa. To accommodate for the increase, Avbob has set up 13 mortuaries in refrigerated shipping containers.
This is our mobile mortuary. As you can see, the back part has shelves that accommodate 16 deceased. The front portion of the container will then handle those that's been coffined already, and the coffins will be placed there. This container is specifically for COVID deceased, so we separate the bodies for the safety of our staff. They know this is a highly contagious zone, and they need to have extra precautionary or take extra precautionary measures. So yeah, and like I said, we can have here between 30 and 40 deceased within this specific mobile mortuary.
In Soweto, Monaghan Legay has also had to make similar adjustments. Usually, he would handle 30 funerals a month. In June alone, he handled 85.
We have made sure that we source refrigerated containers to assist us with the current sketch that is happening. We have also made sure that, you know, we spread out our timelines. So if we were just used to burying on a Saturday, on a Sunday, we now make sure that we bury on every single day of the week. So from Monday, burials are already taking place throughout the week until Sunday.
In addition to handling more services, funeral directors are facing a coffin shortage. They've also voiced concerns over the delays in the issuance of death certificates. Astatal, CGTN.
Well, on a more positive note, these summer holidays mark the annual wedding season in Tunisia. Thousands of couples who missed their ceremonies in spring due to the COVID-19 crisis have pushed their weddings to August. However, maintaining social distancing measures has proved challenging as couples and their families gather to celebrate.
After several weeks without reporting any local infections, the COVID-19 task force in Tunisia has warned that the number of coronavirus cases is on the rise once again in the North African country. In fact, people are no longer respecting the prevention measures, especially at traditional family celebrations like marriages.
The Ministry of Health has made significant steps in fighting coronavirus, but the crisis is not yet over. Maintaining social distancing and respecting safety measures, even at traditional celebrations, is the responsibility of all Tunisians.
This is a recent marriage celebration in the capital city Tunis. Hundreds of family members, friends, as well as guests from 3 different governorates gathered for singing and dancing on the floor.
I postponed my marriage due to the general lockdown and the confinement. I could not wait until next year because the coronavirus crisis could last for years. This is a Tunisian tradition. It's impossible to get married without inviting all our friends and relatives, though some have not come over health concerns.
The bride and her groom joined the singers and the dancing band. People here think they have already missed dozens of celebrations from January until June 2020. Therefore, they are not willing to miss this special occasion. Meanwhile, only a few guests have respected social distancing. People are not aware about the high risk of infection.
I have tried to impose social distancing and to divide the guests into small and separate groups, but once dancing starts, it's impossible to respect any measures. A marriage is viewed as the best day in one's life. Even COVID-19 cannot ruin this celebration. The situation is under control in Tunisia.
According to the Ministry of Local Affairs, thousands of small enterprises, including wedding planners and service providers in different sectors, have lost around $10 million in revenue due to the general lockdown and the confinement, which disrupted cultural and traditional occasions in Tunisia. The National Observatory of New and Emerging Diseases has urged the governors and mayors to ensure that social distancing is being respected throughout Tunisia. However, local authorities insist that only the general lockdown can prevent Tunisians from gathering at family celebrations, which were disrupted due to the COVID-19 crisis. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
My family has been doing this artwork for the past 600 years.
My dream is to be a leading player in Africa in spice sector.
Nobody in the region consumes it. Even me cannot afford the vanilla cooking.
What we've created here is the elegance, the color, the celebration of life.
Now, perhaps you're familiar with saffron. It is a spice used in foods, coloring, medicine, and perfumes. And it is the most expensive spice in the world. It can sell for up to $1,200 a kilogram or $15 for just a couple of grams. Presently, Morocco is the top producer of saffron in Africa. The country produces nearly 7 tons every year. Over 90% of the valuable spice is cultivated in the Taliouine region, which is at the heart of the industry.
الزعفران هو حاجة أساسية في المنطقة، هو المنتوج الوحيد اللي كتعتمد فيه الناس ديال المنطقة، هو الأساس ديالهم فاش كيعتمدوا عليه سنويا. سميتي محمد أزرقي، من مواليد ديال 1989 في دوار إغري، جماعة سيدي حسين، الدائرة ديال تاليوين، العملة تارودانس. أنا دخلت في الميدان في 2013 حيت الأصل ديال جدودي من كيديروا ديك الفلاحة ديال الزعفران، وبديت كنعاون الوالد في المنتوج ديالو، كيفاش كيتغرس، كيفاش كيحرثو، كيفاش كيتسقى. من ديك الساعة أنا خدام فيه، كنتعلمو شوية بشوية. ملي كيبداو الموسم ديال الزعفران تقريبا كنخدمو ما بين 15 حتى 30 واحد. الزعفران كنحرثو كنزرعوه في شتنبر، وكيتسقى في الاول ديال اكتوبر. الجو اللي كيبغي الزعفران كيبغي الجو يكون بارد، الارتفاع، البلاصه اللي فيها الارتفاع كيكون فيها البرد اقل من 7 دوغري درجات، والماء كيبغيه تقريبا على الاقل مره في 20 يوم. كنجمعوا مره واحده في شهر اكتوبر، مره واحده في العام صافي. مرحبا بكم عندنا، مرحبا بكم. احنا بدينا كنقيو الزعفران كنقادو فيه، فاش جبناه في الجنان، جمعنا كامل في الجنان، حنا جبناه للدار بدينا كنقيو. كيفاش كنقيو عاوتاني كيتنقى وحده بوحده كيما كيتجمع في الجنان، كيما كيتجمع في الجنان كيتنقى عاوتاني وحده بوحده بحال. والعيالات بزاف اللي كيخدموا هاد الخدمه هما اللي كيخدموها. وملي كنقيوه عاوتاني كنزيدو فيه النقه اللي الا فيه شي زبال ولا طاحت فيه شي طرف ديال شي وريضه ولا شي حاجه بيضاء كتحيل، كيتنقص ليه الجدر شويه، كنقصوا ليه الجدر باش ما يخسرش الكولور ديالو الا نشف. وملي كنساليو كيتنقى كيتقاد، كنديوه لو شوشوار. انا كنخدم لو شوشوار بزاف، هكا كنقادو في الشوشوار باش ينشف وباش تبقى لا كاليتي كيما هي. حيت كاين اللي كينشفو في الظل، كاين اللي كيديروا في الظل، ولكن الظل كيشد الوقت شويه بزاف، والمشكل كتكون فيه الغبره ولا دوز شي حشره ودوز فوق منه، حيت الزعفران حساس بزاف. ملي كنقادوه في الشوشوار تقريبا كنريقلو على الوقيته فاش بغينا.
السلام عليكم. أزول ليتون هاجر، لاج ولا السن 19 سنة. تعلمنا تقريبا ديك بين 9 سنين 10 سنين، كنا غير كنمشيو معاهم للجنان كنشوفو، ما كنحيدوش، غير كنشوفو كيفاش كيحيدو. مرة كنحيدوهم مرة لا كعرفتي لاش باقيين صغار. ولكن فاش كنجيو للدار كنجلسو، المهم تاني كنشوف فيهم. ولكن فاش تعلمناني تقريبا بين ديك 12 13 هكا.
دابا الزعفران نشف، خصنا نفيريفو نعرفو كيف داير، ياك ما فيه شي حاجه ولا نقادو كامل ونشوفو الريحة ديالو هي هذيك، حتى اللون تا هو بقى كيما هو في الاول. غندوقو اللوغو ديالو ياك ما تحرق ولا شي حاجه، هو هذاك صافي. دابا عندنا هذا هو الزعفران، راه دابا موجود للماكله. السلام عليكم. الفوائد ديال الزعفران كيصلح للبرد، كيصلح للتجميل بحال الوجه، الشعر، كيصلح للبصر حتى هو للعينين. الحاجه الاخرى كاين اللي كيديروا على حسب الشرايين ديال القلب، اللي كيحل الشرايين ديال القلب الى مسدودين ولا شي حاجه، ولكن ما تكثرش منه. الا كثرتي منه راه كيجري الدم بزاف، حتى الانسان يقدر يمشي للغيبوبه.
And it's time for us to take another short break. Hannah will be back with all the business.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. It's time now for your business news. The Zambian subsidiary of Nigeria's Axis Bank has agreed to buy Cavmont Capital Holdings, the Zambian arm of Namibian financial services group Capricorn. Under the terms of the deal, Axis Bank Zambia will acquire the entire issued share capital, assets and liabilities of Cavmont Bank. The transaction is expected to be completed in October this year, subject to regulatory approvals from relevant authorities. In the first quarter of this year, Axis Bank started an ambitious mission of expanding its footprints across Africa. It has so far completed a merger with Nigeria's Diamond Bank and has acquired 100% of Kenya's Transnational Bank as well as its 28 branches. Well, in the meantime, Nigeria ranks second in the world after India among countries with the largest population without access to electricity. Nearly half of the country's 200 million people are without any form of power supply. The World Bank estimates that businesses and households across Africa's largest economy lose up to $29 billion annually as a result of this power failure. With more on this, here's Phil Ihaza.
Omoduni Olumide is getting ready for business today. But first, he has to turn on his generator because he has no power supply. Olumide runs a frozen food business that requires steady electricity, but he says he's suffered huge losses as a result of frequent blackouts.
The electricity company, they will give us light for 2 weeks and they will take it for 1 week. Because this is cold room, the more we don't have light, the more the goods get spoiled, number one. And the higher we buy fuel, for powering generator, we had it up on the cost of the product, whereby it affects our home profit and also affects the citizens that come to patronize us.
Nigeria still struggles to distribute an average of about 4,000 megawatts of electricity for its nearly 200 million population, a far cry from the estimated 180,000 megawatts required by various businesses and households. Decades of government efforts to expand the electricity supply across the country have been met with corruption and mismanagement of funds. And so, about 15 years ago, the federal government made efforts to privatize the industry, but despite this, still regulates the sector even though it's mostly managed by various private firms. Experts say until private firms can run effectively with the right legislative support, the country may not be able to transmit the required megawatts needed for its citizens.
I think the realization for me is that we had a law. This whole reform process was anchored on the Electricity Sector Reform Act, And because we have not implemented it fully the way it was designed to be implemented, and we have neither reviewed it even after the initial implementation, that is why I think the problems continue to plague the industry.
In May, the government reviewed an existing deal with German firm Siemens to upgrade the nation's power infrastructure and expand the country's electricity grid. However, experts say to avoid further mismanagement of funds and corruption in the system, the government will need to completely privatize the power sector.
There's really no silver bullet. We need to move to a private sector-led market, and that's when you get all the efficiencies that you desire. So government trying to audit or police the market does not just work. We've seen it in other sectors. So I think we need to change tack, if you will, to a more reasonable approach to ensure efficiencies are brought in.
The government says it's already working towards reviewing and reenacting the current electricity law in a bid to fully privatize the sector.
Millions of business owners like frozen food dealers are hoping that efforts by the government to put an end to the many years of poor power supply will pay off soon in order for them to recover more profits and improve their business, something experts say could boost Nigeria's economy and attract more investments. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Egypt's revenue from the Suez Canal has risen by 4.7% compared with the previous 5 years. Egypt opened an $8 billion expansion of the canal 5 years ago. It was part of plans to boost the economy and restore Egypt's position as an important trade hub. Suez Canal revenue rose to $27.2 billion during the last 5 years, up from $25.9 billion in the 2010 to 2015 period. Since 2015, 90,000 ships transited the Suez Canal, carrying 5.5 billion tons of cargo, up from 4.6 billion tons during the previous 5 years. Egypt plans to double ship numbers and revenue by 2023 compared with pre-2015 levels. Well, let's turn to China-U.S. tensions now. Beijing is sharply criticizing U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's announcement of the Clean Network campaign. Pompeo had said the U.S. would move against what he called untrusted Chinese apps from the app stores of U.S. mobile carriers and phone makers. Beijing says that it is a smear and a political manipulation.
An intensified effort against China. Not long after its plans to ban TikTok, the U.S. announced an expansion of its Clean Network campaign targeting Chinese tech companies.
With parent companies based in China, apps like TikTok, WeChat, and others are significant threats to personal data of American citizens, not to mention tools for CCP content censorship.
The campaign focuses on 5 critical areas in telecommunications and technology infrastructure, from clean apps to clean cloud, and it aims to prevent Chinese apps and telecom firms from accessing information on U.S. individuals and businesses. China hit back, saying many Chinese companies unilaterally sanctioned by the U.S. are innocent. It insists those products and services are safe.
U.S. politicians keep using the excuse of protecting national security and abusing the country's power to curb Chinese high-tech companies. China firmly opposes this. The action done by the U.S. have no factual basis, and they're smear and political manipulation.
Pompeo gave few details on how the efforts will be carried out. But according to the U.S. State Department, more than 30 countries and territories have joined the campaign. The Trump administration is set on countering the reach of Chinese-made technology in the U.S. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi described the actions by Washington as a textbook case of bullying.
U.S. politicians keep using the excuse of protecting national security and abusing the country's power to curb Chinese high-tech companies. China firmly opposes this. The action done by the U.S. have no factual basis, and they're smear and political manipulation.
The U.S. government has already been cracking down on Chinese technology companies. It has long singled out telecom equipment provider Huawei, encouraging allies not to use its equipment in their 5G networks. As the new science and technology revolution is picking up speed, China said it hopes that the U.S. will give up its obsession with its narrow self-interest and return to the right track of openness and cooperation. Wang Xiwei, CGTN.
Gold continued scaling higher for the third consecutive session on Thursday. The precious metal extended its new record run to $2,057 per ounce. Gold has been rallying as investors weigh a weaker dollar and record low U.S. real yields. Some investors also fear the trillions in unprecedented stimulus from central banks could feed long dormant inflationary pressures and are turning to gold for protection. Goldman Sachs says the metal could climb to $2,300 an ounce. RBC Capital Markets puts the odds of gold reaching $3,000 mark at 40%. Well, the Bank of England says the economic shock inflicted by COVID-19 will be less severe than initially feared. That's despite warnings of a weaker recovery and lasting damage for jobs and growth. Leaving interest rates on hold at a record low of 0.1%, the central bank predicts UK GDP to shrink by a fifth in the first half of this year. The projection, however, is less severe than the 14% slump it predicted in May, which would have been the worst crash in nearly 300 years. At the same time, against a backdrop of rapidly rising job losses across the country, the bank has also warned unemployment could double by the end of the year to 2.5 million. Well, that's all the financial news we have for now, but join us later for Global Business at the top of the hour. Among stories, we'll be delving into our South African businesses continuing to feel the heat as the pandemic continues to ravage that economy. Well, for now, here's more news making headlines with Mahia.
Hannah, thank you very much. Well, still to come here on Africa Live. In sports, we tell you how the dominant athletics forces are coping with the postponed Olympics in our ongoing special series 2020 Olympics, Dreams Live On.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference. How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Now, in our third installment of the postponed 2020 Olympic Games, we take a look at qualifiers from Africa in athletics. CGTN's Richard Nta joins us now for this third segment.
Indeed. Our special series 2020 Olympic Dream Lives On continues. Most of Africa's medals at the Olympic Games have been minted on the track and field and road in the speed, strength, and endurance sport of athletics. In our special coverage of the 2020 Olympics, The Dream Lives On, we step up the pace in Ethiopia, Kenya, and Egypt to find out how the most dominant nations in athletics are handling the postponement of the Tokyo 2020 Games to 2021. The first woman in Egypt to qualify for Tokyo 2020 Olympics contracted COVID-19 and recovered successfully. CGTN's Adel Al-Maroui now brings us the inspiring story of how her Olympic dream lives on.
Heidi Morsi gets ready for her training. She's Egypt's modern pentathlon champion. Heidi has brought Egypt's first Olympic ticket to Tokyo from the 2019 African Championship, but she is practicing as if she's never qualified.
I was the first Egyptian athlete to qualify, like not even in the modern pentathlon, but worldwide. I was the first ever athlete to qualify to Tokyo to make a good result in this World Cup, in this series, so I can qualify from the world rank. When I have a good rank between the other athletes, so it's a good sign for me, for my coaches, for the federation, that I can achieve our dream, which is to get an Olympic medal for the modern pentathlon.
It will make also other players fear you a bit, you know.
Yeah, maybe, yeah, yeah, something like this. Yes.
I met her at Cairo International Stadium, where she goes back to after a tough experience during the COVID-19 lockdown. Heidi caught the disease. Her life then came to a complete halt.
It wasn't easy at all because for the 4 months I was training alone. I can see, for example, the running coach once per week. But when I had the COVID-19, the virus, I stayed like 3 weeks without doing anything. I was staying alone because I cannot see anyone.
To cope with the restrictions imposed and the sudden pause to her athletic aspirations, it was a rough ride for the 19-year-old athlete. Heidi knew exactly what she needed to do, though.
I wasn't too much depressed because I knew that I have time. But it wasn't easy. So I remember that mentally I had to be in this period I had to be tough. I was working too much on my mental toughness with my mental coach because I said that okay, there's no time, there's no much time now, or there's no facilities to train my body, but this is the time to train my mind.
Mahmoud Abdulrahman has been her running coach since she reached the Youth Olympics in 2014. He closely monitors her speed and always tries to push her further. Mahmoud told me that somehow Heidi manages to get better after all the obstacles she has so far faced.
When Heidi is fixated on something, she gets it done. We have been through many setbacks during her career, like injuries for example, but she always comes out stronger than before. She has been a champion since she was 14 years old.
It's why she's been excited the Olympics got postponed. This energetic young woman understands that at her age, more training means better results. Already she has made history by being the youngest Egyptian to qualify to the Olympics back in 2016.
My dream 4 years ago was only to go there and explore different things, take the title like I'm Olympian now. But now, no, 4 years later, I have 1 year now till Tokyo. My dream is different. 4 years older now, so I have to think differently.
With such passion to the sport and focus on her progress, Heidi Morsi wants to make history in Tokyo next year and become the most successful Egyptian in modern pentathlon. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
The postponement of the Tokyo 2020 Games by a year came as a crushing blow to thousands of athletes across the world who had spent the last 4 years getting ready for the event. Besides the demanding physical and financial toll, a huge number of face mental challenges as they strive to keep fit for 2021. In our special segment, we take a look at sports mental wellness.
Did you know sports is 10% physical and 90% mental? Every sportsperson needs to apply some degree of physical strength in their game. From athletes to swimmers, cyclists to basketball players, etc. All have to put in the extra hard work. But the most underlying factor is mental wellness. So what happens when a global pandemic affects one of the most prestigious sporting events, the Olympics? Following the postponement of the Tokyo 2020 Olympics, sportsmen and women across the globe were affected in one way or the other. we highlight some of their reactions to the breaking news. So, bearing the weight of such news, how did they get back on their feet? And did the news affect their training and their focus? I spoke to a sports therapist to get clarity on this matter. Thank you so much, Sean, for your time.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
To what extent do you feel Olympians have been affected mentally by the postponement of the Olympics?
So what we found in our athletes, and completely understandably so, is we found a significant emotional impact and emotional roller coaster that they've gone through since the news has come out and since the news has broke. And understandably so. I think most of these athletes work 4 years and longer to reach their dreams and reach this goal of going to the Olympics, and it's in this time has been taken away from them. And if you look at Kubler-Ross's model from a psychological perspective, athletes generally go through a modified version of shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and eventually acceptance. And it's my job during this time, my role, to get them to that stage of acceptance. However, that doesn't take the emotional impact away. So understandably so, it's been a difficult time and a bit of a roller coaster, but a significant negative emotional impact on them.
Now, with all the uncertainty, do you feel Olympians can still be anxious about the Games in 2021, given that no vaccine, no cure has been found for COVID-19?
I think it goes without saying that any athlete is going to experience some form of anxiety during this time. If you compare it to, the Rio 2016 with the Zika virus, a lot of the athletes went through the same thing. It was that fear and that anxiousness of contracting the disease. At that time it was through mosquitoes, etc. But you can understandably the anxiety will be present. A large part of their focus for the time being is going to be to refocus on their goals and make the decision of whether they want to go to the Olympics or not. But it's not a case of whether there will be anxiety or if there will be anxiety. It's when anxiety comes and the impact that it's going to have on them.
What kind of support do you feel should be accorded to athletes during this tough time?
As an Olympic Committee, I truly believe we need to employ professionals to go reach out and chat to these athletes during this time. So from my perspective, get them the support that they need during this time. Start with a psychologist or professional, get a support group, and then eventually get in touch with the coaches. And that's going to be from a professional Olympic Committee perspective. I think all the Olympic committees around the world and countries need to put that in place.
All right, thank you so much, Sean, for your time and expertise. Would have loved to talk long, but this is it for now. We appreciate it.
Having served notice by winning a bronze medal at the Doha 2019 World Athletics Championship, Kenya's Amos Kipruto has landed a dream slot in the Tokyo 2020 Kenya men's marathon team. Touted as the next big thing in the marathon, he is hoping the postponement of the Games has not robbed him of his chance of medaling at the greatest sporting carnival in the world. Our correspondent, Shadiq Shaban, brings us more.
This is how the day begins for this group of 4 Kenyan athletes. Each of them is now donning a face mask as part of new training regulations. The team has remained unchanged for over 7 weeks now since they began training.
Now we are prepared for 2-day long runs. We are going to do 35 kilometers. And I think everybody is here capable to do it. And we are ready now.
3 athletes, Barcelis Kipyego, Solomon Diego and Jairus Kipchoge, have not qualified for the Olympic Games but are pacing Amos Kipruto, who has secured a slot in the Games. Ordinarily, this group would have had at least a dozen athletes in training.
In my side, I miss my training mate because I really enjoy the company of my training mate.
Training for the Olympic Games in the era of coronavirus pandemic has forced Amos Kipruto to totally overhaul his personal schedule. Amos Kipruto represented Kenya internationally for the first time in 2019 and won the bronze medal in the men's marathon at the World Athletics Championships in Doha. He'd planned to follow it up quickly with another medal at the Olympic Games in 2020.
Olympic have been postponed to, from now is 1 year exactly. So you see now you are aiming to finish the program and come to rest, but now you start now to adjust your mind to say, oh, still have 1 year to train.
So now we see it's a long journey, but we accept as an athlete because our health is important. So because we know in future we have many races to race. This is the new normal for the elite Kenyan athlete. With reduced movements and interactions due to coronavirus pandemic, Amos Kipruto is now running another race of his life. So this is the second part of my program where I practice to know about the dairy farming, to learn for the future. Not after my career, I will start practicing a huge dairy farming. So I see that is a good income in me. If everything had gone according to plans, then Amos Kipruto would have been in Japan at this particular point in time, preparing to compete in the marathon at the Olympic Games. But the reigning world bronze medalist is not in Japan and is not competing. He is holed up here in Kenya and has turned into a small-scale farmer whilst preparing and waiting to compete at the rescheduled Olympic Games in 2021. Sadiq Shaban, CGTN, in Kapsabet, Kenya.
Ball games have been a staple of the modern Olympic Games since their inception in 1896. Join us tomorrow in our special series, The 2020 Olympic Dream Lives On, and find out how African countries are gearing up for Tokyo 2021. Back to you in studio.
And that's it for this edition of Africa Live. Remember, you can send your feedback directly to us. The contacts on your screen are there for you to use, and follow us on our digital media platforms. I'm Mahia Mutua. Thanks for watching.